All right, welcome to another edition of Dan and Jack Talk Congressional Districts. In this one, we have our 11th edition, which features Indiana's first congressional district, where we have Jennifer Ruth Green, the Republican, fighting against Frank Mrvan, the Democrat incumbent. Jack, you want to tell us a little bit about this district?
Yeah, so what do the Jackson Five, John D. Rockefeller, and steel manufacturing have in common? If you guessed Northwest Indiana's first congressional district, then you would be correct. This district takes the population overflow of the Chicago metro area that bleeds into Indiana, including many of those who fled the high tax state, which is Illinois.
Where we're from.
Um, yes. So Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, purchased his Whiting, Indiana refinery in 1889 to process oil from Lima, Ohio. The plant now is the largest inland refinery in the United States and is able to process an astonishing 400,000 barrels of oil per day. The
But
district
um,
also boasts, yeah, go ahead.
but they won't let you visit the Whiting,
Yeah.
Indiana refinery. After reading a book on John Rockefeller a few years ago, I called them to ask if I could tour it, and they told me no, it was a national security risk. So yeah,
So if you want to see it, then you can't. But
yeah, but it's
it's there.
there. It's there.
So the district, though, it also boasts some of the country's biggest steel manufacturing. It has Gary, Indiana, who brought up Michael and Janet Jackson, and it is the largest city in the district. Those from Illinois or from Chicago, Illinois, might be surprised to hear of Gary potentially being represented by a Republican, but the city has been in the tailspin of population decline for more than 60 years, dropping from 178,000 to just 69,000 today.
Yeah, absolutely. And Indiana's first congressional district is one that has historically voted Democrat, but the margins are shrinking. So Frank Mrvan's 57% victory in 2020, which might sound like a blowout, which usually it would be, but it was against really a non-funded opponent, and was still the lowest performance in a century for the Democrats in that district. The GOP challenger in this district, if successful here, is someone we might see as a senator or on a national ticket someday. So we have Jennifer Ruth Green, who's an African American, former Air Force lieutenant colonel, who served in combat and then recruited spies on the ground in Iraq for the United States. Really an impressive resume for this lady. Um, After that, she started a faith based nonprofit to give at risk youth some training in the aerospace industry. And in her day job, she's a commercial pilot where she actually notes in some of her videos that there's only 150 African American commercial pilots in the entire United States, which is kind of an astonishingly low figure.
Yeah,
Um, she's a lady that like clearly loves America and sees us as a force for good in the world. She's very pro-life, very biblically minded in her approach and worldview. She talks about losing friends in Iraq, and you can really see she appreciates the price that we pay for our freedoms. Um, she understands how regulation can suffocate business, uh, but isn't 100% free trade, as one probably shouldn't be if they're running to represent that district, which is one of the biggest manufacturing districts in the country. With regard to tariffs, she doesn't want cheap Chinese steel competing with American steel made in her district. You want to tell us about kind of her background and why she ran, Jack?
yeah. So she was motivated because we all saw when President Trump gave the State of the Union speech in 2020. Afterwards, when Nancy Pelosi ripped up the speech, and so that kind of motivated Ruth Green to hop in the race.
In terms of
Yeah, go
fundraising,
ahead.
she's already at parity with her Democratic opponent, Frank Mrvan, with 454,000 on hand to his $630,000. So that's pretty impressive for her, and actually kind of doesn't speak terribly well of Mrvan, since usually an incumbent should have a decent cash advantage coming out of the gate, because you've had 2 years to fundraise after you win. So I don't know if maybe he just kind of didn't do any of that or what, but
Did he have a tough primary though, or no?
not this cycle. I mean, he had a primary in 2018 or 2020 where he barely won. But that was the only primary he's had. He sailed through this cycle.
Hmm. Yeah, that's not very impressive numbers at all then.
Yeah, no, I mean he does have other impressive factors to him, but that's not really one of them. Um, but just because of her impressive resume, Jennifer Ruth Green shouldn't imagine herself as a lock in this district. When you listen to her opponent Frank Mrvan, he does seem at first pretty unimpressive, but it becomes quickly clear that he's kind of an adept politician. You want to tell us a little bit about Frank, Jack?
Yeah, so I mean, his resume is not as glittering as Ruth Green's, but he does have what it seems to be. He knows what it means to be a legislator in his bones. His father was the longest serving Indiana state senator in history, serving from 1978 through this year, with only a minor interruption. There was a 4-year gap, where I think he lost a primary, if I remember correctly. But Mrvan himself has, however, served only locally as a township trustee before ascending to the Congress last year. But he talks of helping keep people in their homes in that role who are struggling. And it should be mentioned, though, about that township trustee office. It wasn't like a small thing. It's kind of, from what I was reading about it, it seems to be a big deal in the district, or at least in the county, because I think his is the biggest out of 4 townships, maybe in the county. I don't know if you saw that, Dan.
Yeah, and township trustee is a role that varies from state to state. Like I was a township trustee in Illinois, and there are certain things in that role in Illinois in a suburban district, which I was in, where now I'm in Ohio. I say township trustee, and all people think is it maintains rural roads, and that's all that they do. So, and sounds like in Indiana, you're keeping people in their homes. I mean, that was something that even in Illinois, where we did more than they do in Ohio, is something that we were not involved in at all.
Yeah, no, that's a big part of it. But listening to a Steel Workers Union endorsement interview, when Dan and I were listening to it, you can hear his non-flashy approach echoed with stories of the younger Mrvan showing up for his union people without fanfare. He also seems to have a knack for retail politics, which should be no surprise, considering how long his father was in the game. On one interview, you could hear Mrvan pick out a lady who was asking a question. This is actually really impressive. He asks what her name is, and when he asked her again what her name was, he was reminded of a conversation they had with her in a Target parking lot a few weeks before. So I mean, that's not something common that you see in politicians. They usually forget about their constituents, but it seems like Mrvan remembered this one conversation that he just randomly had.
Yeah, and retail politics is one of the strongest things. If somebody's good at it, it makes them a very formidable candidate. I mean, I would take somebody with retail strength over like kind of flash appeal every day of the week. And it's very rare. That actually reminds me of a story illustrating the opposite of that. I remember going to a funeral for a mayor in West Chicago, and this guy who was running for Congress at the time was at the funeral. We saw him there, and the next day we were at a local Republican function, and the widow of the deceased was at the Republican function, and he introduces himself to her. Hi, so and so. Nice to meet you. And we're all like, oh man. So, I mean, when you're good at retail, you're good. When you're bad, look out. Like, so yeah.
So, oh man, I think I know who you're talking about, but
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
let's yeah, let's see. ideologically, though, Mrvan is a standard Democrat, and he doesn't really depart from the party orthodoxy. He's voted with Biden 100% of the time. He's pro-abortion, declaring that it's even a human right. In 2020, Mrvan narrowly won a competitive primary, which we talked about before, by 4,000 votes after being outspent 2-1, though. In the general, he overperforms Biden. His support is really coming from labor, and that's what carried the day for him in that election. And that
Yeah,
kind
no
of that
question.
comes from his good demeanor as a candidate, and he does seem to emphasize the old school political ethos of helping people out.
Yeah, he seems like a really good candidate. I mean, Jennifer Ruth Green's resume is outstanding, but she should not underestimate Frank because he seems very old school in his approach. And what we've learned in the years that we've done this is old school beats new school because old school works.
Yeah,
And new school thinks that you can run a bunch of Facebook ads or figure out some social media algorithm and that's going to carry the day or run some TV commercials. But people will always vote for the person that showed up to their door. And hopefully she does not take a nap on the ground game because she could be a national figure. I mean, I don't think either of us doubt it. I mean, what do you
no,
think, Jack?
no, I definitely don't disagree with that. But I mean, like you said, if she doesn't capitalize or work hard on the ground game, Mrvan will just destroy her in the general election.
Yeah. So hopefully this is a seat we can pick up. Before we go, though, I was reminded of another story of that candidate I just told you about, who forgot the lady's name. So a buddy of mine who was on this campaign, this guy, I think he was the chief consultant at this time. And he was probably running for Congress again at this point. This guy ran for like a million different things.
Yeah,
He finally wound up as a state senator. But there
we won't
was
say his name. We don't want
no,
to
we won't
embarrass
say his
him,
name,
but
but people watching from Illinois probably know who we're talking about. Um, so my buddy gets a call from somebody that there's footage of this guy um, rolling up in his state senate plates to a golf course, pulling into a handicap spot and slinging his clubs over over his back. And then just piece it out of there.
oh
And
boy.
then my buddy confronts him about it, and he's like, John, well, I have back problems. My back was feeling really good that day.
Yeah, not a good look. Not what you
No,
want your
no. I
candidate
mean,
to
no,
do.
yeah, not
He's
smart.
also forgotten my name multiple times. I've met him
Oh yeah,
multiple
I've
times.
probably met him like 15, 20 times at least, but but whatever. Yeah, some of these guys just not good at the game. But Jennifer Ruth Green, do not take the ground game lying down. Frank Mrvan will probably eat your lunch if you do so. We want to see you have a good career. Um, you have any other final thoughts on the district, Jack?
No, I think that just about covers it.
All right. Well, thank you to everybody for listening, and we will join you on the next one. God bless.